Hello and welcome back. I have realized in last 3 videos that I did, or maybe the last one especially, that I haven't been very good at introducing myself at the beginning of each video, and I'm trying to correct that. So for this video I will give like an official introduction, and hopefully this will change for other videos. I will slowly get better at it. So welcome back. If you're someone who has subscribed and watched my previous videos, if you're new, welcome. I'm Alex. I'm a PhD student at the Faculty of Social Sciences in Ljubljana, and I hope you stick around, subscribe and like, as they say, and let's get cracking. So first, for this video, what I wanted to do is introduce this magazine that I got maybe like 2 weeks ago at a local bookstore here. It's actually published by the collaborative newspaper project, was initiated by the photographer and artist Jošt Franko, here a Slovenian artist, and it's published by ZRC SAZU, Slovenian Migration Institute. And you can see it's actually really beautiful. I'm gonna try and show you, but maybe later I will zoom in on certain aspects that I want to address in the texts that appear here. Hold on a second. You see how it looks. It has really beautiful photography, and I think also some art. Like this one here, it's a flag, and then they have one photo. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. One photo of a family, I think. I believe the author of the text, so these are like texts and photos of the authors. All the texts were written by refugees and migrants. Oh yeah, here it is. This one. It's really beautiful. Okay, so on the front page it says, "A Memory Without Evidence, a collaborative newspaper publication." A Memory Without Evidence is a newspaper publication featuring histories and narratives of people on the move and refugees who have traversed the Balkan refugee route and managed to reach the European Union. Created through a series of workshops and dialogues with displaced communities, the collaborative newspaper presents the stories of those who have traded their imprisonment behind the razor wire, landmines, and systemic violence that was enforced upon them on the Balkan refugee route for being held captive by the EU asylum system. For many involved in the creation of the newspaper, the struggle for their existence, recognition, and freedom does not end once they reach their desired safe haven, but remains a distant prospect. And now they give like some quotes from people that they have interviewed. But what I found particularly interesting, and I would like to address it here, it's these short descriptions. Hold on, let me flip you over so I can show you actually what's going on. So I'm gonna show you now. You can see like this. I have it on the table. It's quite big publication, so you really... What I wanted to address here is this short description that they have here. It says, Zied Abdellaoui, I'm sorry if I mispronounced this, is an asylum seeker from Tunisia. He studied political sciences and traveled 4,517 kilometers back and forth on the Balkan refugee route before reaching Europe almost 4 years later. I would also like to address that not on all stories here this description is given, but sometimes it's given in different form. You can see here the photo. I think this is the portrait. I mean, the photography is very beautiful and really shows the reality behind the lives of many of these refugees. I think here, found refuge in Slovenia. Okay, this one is not. Hold on a second. Let me show you this here. Oh, I'm so bad at this. I'm sorry if this is like wobbling, if I'm... Okay. So I think there is one more with that description. No, found refuge in Slovenia. But anyhow, you get the point. Was born in Syria, grew up in Sweden. Okay. So I'm gonna flip you now over so I can actually discuss this this description. Welcome back to the frame that we usually use for this vlog. I will now read a small paragraph from an article written by Milica Bakić-Heyden. The article itself is called Nesting Orientalisms, the Case of Former Yugoslavia. In this paragraph, Bakić-Heyden says, the phenomenon of nesting Orientalisms is evident in the former Yugoslavia and its successor states, where the designation of other has been appropriated and manipulated by those who have themselves been designated as such in Orientalist discourse. Thus, while Europe as a whole has dispersed not only the Orient proper, but also the parts of Europe that were under Oriental Ottoman rule, Yugoslavs who reside in areas that were formerly the Habsburg monarchy distinguish themselves from those in areas formerly ruled by the Ottoman Empire. Hence, improper. Within the latter area, Eastern Orthodox peoples perceive themselves as more European than those who assumed identities of European Muslims and who further distinguish themselves from the ultimate Orientals, non-Europeans. She further in this article talks about the creation of national identity in this region before socialist Yugoslavia, and she explains how the creation of national identity for current countries that had a history being part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, they have attached their national identity to this past of being part of this empire. However, for example, for Serbia, which has been part of the Ottoman Empire, one important distinction is that the Serbian national identity is attached to the pre-Ottoman period. That is the Serbian kingdoms that existed before the Ottomans conquered the Balkans. So I find it very, very interesting because this kind of discourse can be very much present and felt in the day-to-day conversations that you might have with Slovene people here, because a lot of the times Slovenia, even as a state, it doesn't, like Slovenians, they don't see themselves as part of the Balkan and the Balkan culture, because they perceive the identity of being Balkan as something savage, something that is undesirable. And we see this also with Croatians as well, in Croatia with Croats. And in that context, the further east you go, the further this nesting Orientalism continues to kind of unravel itself, because Serbs then perceive themselves as uniquely European in comparison to the Muslim population that either lives in Bosnia or in Serbia. So, and this is the kind of the nesting Orientalisms that Bakić talks about. And we see it now going back to the description here in this magazine, when the author says that these refugees were on the Balkan route before reaching Europe. He actually is saying, while they were traveling through these Balkan countries, meaning Serbia was one of the countries in the Balkans that was part of the Balkan route, these countries are not Europe, technically. They are kind of this othered Oriental. So I just wanted to kind of talk about this a little bit, maybe also introduce the context. One of the important historical contexts of the region, specifically because for the next vlog, the novels that I will be analyzing are set in the region and they tackle different stories within this discourse. So that's the magazine. And then I wanted to talk to you about, let me see where I can put this up. To talk to you about a book that I've been reading, and it's called Caring Democracies, Markets, Equality and Justice by Joan C. Tronto. Overall, the book for me didn't really open any important aspects on the subject of care. As for my PhD, actually I have a lot of criticism of how she is, what kind of arguments she's using. They're very in this bourgeois liberal discourse. But there was one particularly important part that I would like to talk to you about, and that is, she did mention some very important authors that she presents, and I found those authors to be quite interesting. But overall, her analysis of care, her ideas of how this should be done, it's not something that I approve of or agree with. Let's say not approve, but I agree with her analysis. So I'm going to read one paragraph here. Okay, here it is. So she quotes, she paraphrases this author. That's also another question, how accurate her paraphrasing of some authors is, or understanding of other authors' works. As I haven't read most of these authors that she quotes, so I cannot really know how accurate her interpretation of their work is. But let's say for this one author, I can assume that it is accurate. She says, "It is important, though, not to follow the philosopher's lead and to define all care as good care. For to do so is to allow ourselves to be misled by the ways in which care can function discursively to obscure injustice. Consider, for example, Uma Narayan's account of British colonialism in India, which points to a darker side of care discourse. Colonialism, Narayan observed, did not attempt to justify itself to the imperialist population by claiming to be a system of the exploitation of others' goods, property, and labor. Instead, the narrative of self-explanation was a discourse of care. The natives would be Christianized, civilized, made better by their encounter with British, Western, and Christian ideals. Women also were brought into the discursive spread of good colonialism in this way. Narayan's example does more than simply show that care can be deployed discursively to bad as well as to good purpose. It also points to the limits of relying upon a concept like care for making judgments about the world. And I think this is really brilliant, especially considering what is going on today in the world, and we are frequently exposed to statements by certain officials of certain states where they are explaining these horrifically distractive actions by pointing out how they're actually doing this for the benefit of a certain population. And in that vagueness, you can pretty much assume what I'm referring to. I'm referring to the current genocide in Gaza. We have heard so many times these statements how the Israeli military is very, very careful when it is bombing densely populated areas in Gaza, and how they give them warning before they actually bomb the building so the civilians can evacuate, or that they are only killing military personnel while the civilians are not harmed. And in this kind of discourse, I found this particularly interesting because you can see that they are trying to present this as some kind of a care. We really do care about the civilians in Gaza, and that's why we do all these steps before we actually bomb a block, a building where civilians live. So that's one of the, I think, positive aspects of this book. She uses other authors, like she paraphrases other authors that I found interesting as well, but I'm not gonna get into that. I will just address some parts where I think she failed. In my eyes, like, she failed so much that it's not even possible to understand how is it possible that she is in one aspect using these authors, other authors whose work is incredibly important in this decolonial discourse, like criticism of capitalism, neoliberalist system, and so on, but at the same time she's kind of null and voiding everything else by writing things like this. And what I'm going to talk about, let me just look at the page number now. What I'm going to talk about now is that throughout this book she writes about this understanding of how men have been exempt from actually caring in a way that the society actually needs. So this exemption from care that the society needs is based on what she calls paths of protection and production. And this paths of protection and production she defines as a kind of care. But she says that this is not the care, although she defines this as care, it is not really the only care that the society needs. So she says here, I'm gonna quote again, "In a way, both protection and production are kinds of care, but they repair, maintain, and preserve daily life as one remove rather than in the direct and intimate ways usually associated with care. Both protection and production are essential for living well and for living well in a democratic society, but they are not all that is required for living well. Bringing these two aspects of life back into balance with other elements of care then will make visions of more democratic societies possible. Indeed, at the end of the chapter, I will propose that the imbalances created by the gendered scripts of caring responsibilities also distort how we think about freedom itself. I have to take a sip of water, my throat is dry. So my criticism of this care is basically that she is reinforcing this patriarchal notion that women are these helpless beings who need protection. And she even at one point says like, men don't care because to make this ideological framework more concrete, they are given a pass out of what we normally regard as caring responsibilities because of two other forms of contributions they make to society. So these contributions, protection and production, it's like, first of all, the protection aspect, as if women need to be protected. But the question is, who do women need to be protected from? And why is it that they require protection? Second, the production aspect. She's reinforcing this bourgeois ideological aspect where she's treating as if women are not active participants in the wage relations in the contemporary capitalist society. And as if women, they contribute in that way, and then when they come back home, they are also engaged in this care work at home. Of course, this also depends on your class, on your race, and ultimately also this is extremely gendered, and she's reinforcing this gendered dualism in this argument. And because of this, I would like to recommend one book. It's Patriarchy of the Wage, Notes on Marx, Gender and Feminism by Silvia Federici. And Silvia Federici explains this really, really well in the collection of essays in this book. And finally, another critique that I would like to give, and it kind of connects to this critique of mine of the notion of protection and production as care, and then you can also see and understand how is it that she defines protection and production that men offer as care. She says, in this context, she talks about military, and she says, while in American popular culture the police are now viewed as heroes, they also remain less visibly servants. Protect and serve is the motto of the Los Angeles Police Department, emblazoned on police cars with cars viewed throughout the world in Hollywood television and film productions. Although the military has occupied a different place in public imagination, its clear function, in brackets, once wars of aggression became less acceptable politically, close bracket, is protection. In a way, protecting the territory of the state is a kind of care work, and the Army Corps of Engineers, a main engine of early American economic development, still embodies the order meaning of police and seems to be engaged in care work. Although there are ways in which military service is care, however, it is not conceived this way. Furthermore, as the actual military forces become more integrated by race and gender, it becomes increasingly necessary to refine the meaning of the military to make its mission more masculine. For me, to identify military, any kind of oppressive institution, oppressive state apparatus, because military and police are the extended arm of the oppressive state apparatus. To define it as care work is just, I cannot. I mean, I really try to understand, and in that context, I would just recommend one book. I don't have a physical copy with me here, but you should check out Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. She wrote a book. I'm trying now to remember what was the name. Hold on. Yes, the book is called Loaded, A Disarming History of the Second Amendment. And she goes in great detail about the history of guns, military, and this kind of policing in the US. Another thing that I would like to mention is that this book is, because she's American author, so it's very much in the context of America. It really has very little to offer for anyone who doesn't come from America or hasn't lived there or comes from different parts of the world, because this is very, very, very much in the context of American discourse. I will now talk about the books I ordered. I purchased these books when Pluto Press had a discount in April, I believe. And I have one more book that is arriving either tomorrow or on Monday. And I will start with that one. And all of these books that I purchased in some way are connected to my PhD. And the first book is called Constellations of Care, Anarcha-Feminism in Practice. Description: what do we do when the state has abandoned us, from failing health system to housing crisis to cascading ecological collapse? It's increasingly evident that state-centered politics do not protect us from the violence of colonialism and capitalism, fascism and patriarchy. In fact, they actively work to harm us. Anarchist feminism, or Anarcha-Feminism, shows us that the ways we tend to our social relations can build a new world inside the old one. We can take care of each other when nothing else will, supplying communal well-being and liberatory horizons. From communitarian kitchens to medic collectives, squatted social centers to queer theater troupes, Ljubljana to Mexico City, Constellations of Care powerfully underscores that we already have everything we need and desire in one another to carve out lives worth living. I find it particularly interesting because there is one chapter that is dedicated to this collective in Ljubljana. I think. Let me see if I can find it here. I cannot find it here. Anyhow, I see the chapters, but I don't see which one it is. Okay, I'm gonna go on. So the next book is To Exist is to Resist, Black Feminism in Europe, edited by, and I really apologize if I butcher these names, I probably will, Akwugo, Emejulu, and Francesca Sobande. It says, this book brings together activists, artists, and scholars of color to show how Black feminism and Afrofeminism are being practiced in Europe today, exploring their differing social positions in various countries and how they organize and mobilize to imagine a Black feminist Europe. Deeply aware that they are constructed as others living in a racialized and hierarchical continent, the contributors explore gender, class, sexuality, and legal status to show that Black women and women of color are both invisible, presumed to be absent from and irrelevant to European societies, and hyper-visible, assumed to be passive and sexualized, angry and irrational. Though imagining a future outside the neocolonial frameworks of contemporary Europe, this book explores a variety of critical spaces, including motherhood and the home, friendships and intimate relationships, activism and community, and literature, dance and film. On on to the next one. Greater than the sum of our parts, feminism, internationalism, Palestine. Nada Elia. How is the struggle for Palestinian freedom bound up in other struggles? And how are activists coming together globally to achieve justice and liberation for all? In this bold book, Palestinian activist Nada Elia unpacks Zionism from its militarism to its prisons, its environmental devastation, and gendered violence. She insists that Palestinians' fate is linked through bonds of solidarity to other communities crossing racial and gender lines. Weaving an intersectional feminist understanding of Israeli apartheid throughout her analysis, she also looks deeper into the interconnectedness of Palestine with Black, migrant, and queer movements, and with other indigenous struggles against settler colonialism, including that of Native Americans. And finally, Become Ungovernable, an Abolition Feminist Ethic for Democratic Living by H.L.T. Kwan. Says become ungovernable is a provocative new work of political thought setting out to reclaim freedom, justice, and democracy, revolutionary ideas that are all too often wrapped in the interests of capital and the state, revealing the mirage of mainstream democratic thought and the false promises of liberal political ideologies. H.L.T. Kwan offers an alternative approach, an abolition feminism drawing on a kaleidoscope of refusal praxis and on a deep engagement with the Black radical tradition and queer analytics. With each chapter anchored by episodes from the long history of resistance and rebellions against tyranny, Kwan calls for us to take up a feminist ethic of living rooted in the principle of radical inclusion, mutually and friendship as part of the larger toolkit for confronting fascism, white supremacy, and the neoliberal labor regime. So yeah, that's it. I was hoping that this video was going to be shorter, but obviously, as we know by now, the woman likes to talk. So please forgive again for this being longer than I thought. I thought it was going to be maybe like 15 minutes. But then again, I'm a very slow reader, and this is called a slots book club. I mean, I consider myself as being kind of a sloth when it comes to reading. Anyhow, enough yammering. I want to conclude. Thank you for being here, and if you stuck around till the end, and if you can maybe subscribe, that would be great, and share the content if you like this kind of approach to book reviewing. And I hope you stick around, and I will see you in the next vlog. Bye!